All right, I got to give you some breaking news. Tucker Carlson is out at Fox News.
Well, isn't that firsthand news? Welcome to the beginning of the last days. I'm pretty shocked by this information today. Tucker Carlson, my husband, and I looked at us and we said, well, this is the reason we pay extra to have Fox News. It's because we get Tucker. If we don't have Tucker, well, it looks like maybe we're just going to cancel that whole television network because Tucker's who we cared about. Now, I have a feeling Tucker Carlson isn't going to go far because we're all going to find a way to get the news out to tell the truth. That's what the truth people are doing, is they're finding a new way to do it. Now, Don Lemon has also been let go from CNN. Oh, you don't want me to go ahead because you've got it all, you mean? Oh, he's got it planned out. Okay. So, well, then let's have a look at, how about we do Tucker Carlson's, we can talk about that with our honorable guest today, the Honourable Brian Peckford. I want to let's welcome him on the show then. So we have a lot to go through. So sorry about the little bit of mayhem, but a lot is happening. Mr. Peckford, thank you very much. We all know you as the former Premier of Newfoundland, Labrador, and you are the last living First Minister who helped negotiate with 12 other First Ministers of Canada and signed the Constitution of Canada to include the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which has been extremely controversial in the last couple of years. So we honor you. We thank you for being here. What do you make of this news of Tucker Carlson leaving?
Oh, I sort of, now that it's announced, I sort of sensed it in the last little while with the court decision where Fox News it wasn't even a decision. It was an agreement that Fox News reached with the Dominion Voting Systems people and paid out $800 or $900 million or something. I sort of sensed that something was going to happen at Fox News. I didn't think it was going to be Tucker just the same, because he has the biggest audience of everybody in cable news in North America. So it's quite a development, quite a happening. I noticed just before I came on with you that I thought I'd just go check a few places. BBC in the UK and the BBC World had it as his main story for a period of time. So it is pretty big news because he was influential not only in North America but also worldwide because of his audience and because of his steadfast, defense of basic values and of ethics and of honesty. And so, it's very sad to see somebody who's stuck to their guns through this woke period be gone from a major news network. But I suspect he's not gone far, and we'll hear from him very soon. But nevertheless, I don't think it's good news for all of those people who value truth.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I just kind of lost you there for a second. I want to play you Tucker Carlson's final clip because I think it's apropos to what you're saying right now. And it's almost as if Tucker, he was very prophetic. I would call him a very prophetic voice in our world. He seemed to always be on top of the very latest stories that nobody else wanted to cover. But this was his one of his final points. Let's have a look.
You look around and you see so many people break under the strain, under the downward pressure of whatever this is that we're going through. And you look with disdain and sadness as you see people become quislings, you see them revealed as cowards, you see them going along with a new thing, which is clearly a poisonous thing, a silly thing, saying things they don't believe because they want to keep their jobs. If there's a single person in this room who hasn't seen that through George Floyd and COVID and the Ukraine war, raise your hand. Oh, nobody? Right. You all know what I'm talking about. And you're so disappointed in people. You are, and you realize that the herd instinct is maybe the strongest instinct. I mean, it may be stronger than the hunger and sex instincts, actually. The instinct, which again is inherent to be like everybody else and not to be cast out of the group, not to be shunned, that's a very strong impulse in all of us from birth. And it takes over, unfortunately, in moments like this, and it's harnessed, in fact, by bad people in moments like this, to produce uniformity. And you see people going along with this, and you lose respect for them. And that's certainly happened to me at scale over the past 3 years. I'm not mad at people, I'm just sad, I'm disappointed. How could you go along with this? You know it's not true, but you're saying it anyway? Really? You're putting your pronouns in your email? You're ridiculous.
Yes. So he says things like that, and he says it with courage. And what he's basically saying, Mr. Peckford, is that we are surrounded by cowards who will not speak out in our generation. Do you find that after everything you've been through?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I find it in spades, and he said it so well there. For example, in my own case, in the last 3 years since I started to defend the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and to oppose the lockdowns and mandates and so on, that I've lost just about all my political friends, and nobody from my caucus in Newfoundland and my cabinet in Newfoundland have reached out to me since I took this stand. And so I have, like many other people, been alone in this fight. Really, it's only amongst the elected people or formerly elected people, and Maxime Bernier and myself, him being a minister in a former federal government, and myself being a first minister of a province. And as Maxime can tell you, and I can vouch for in the last 3 years in particular, how and Tucker's so right too. As soon as you start to really stand up, even within this movement, by the way, even within this freedom movement, because I had to resign from the National Citizens Inquiry, and I resigned from taking back our freedoms, all related to ethics and standing up for truth and fairness in the pursuit of what we were supposed to be pursuing. So I fully understand, and no question, Tucker's comments there strike a huge chord with me.
Every day I open with my dad's Bible. Mr. Peckford, he passed away a year and a half ago, and I miss him every day. But I'm comforted when I look at his Bible that he has underlined from front to back. And today it opened to 1 Peter 3, verse 17. 1 Peter 3:17. And my father underlined, "For it is better, if the will of God be so, that you suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing." And I think that people are not willing to suffer any longer for doing the right thing. They reject those of us who speak the truth. We're under fire. We have potentially Bill C-11 happening, which will severely hamper those of us who want to speak the truth in this country. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was definitely put there, I think, to protect us. But what do you say after all that you've seen us go through regarding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Yeah, no, I'm saddened every morning. I wake up. I'm saddened by what has happened over the last 3 years, and I never thought. And when I was on your programs before and on your interviews and other interviews like this, I always said that we are in the second period and we still had the third period to go because the courts would protect us. And I sit here today now as it relates to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I'm very worried that up to this point in time, and with a lot of decisions under our belt, the courts are not protecting us, and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms has been diminished by both the governments and the leadership of this country, and now by the judiciary. So we're at a really, really critical point in our history as a democracy. And right now, we're not a democracy. We're not a pure, full democracy like we used to be. We're not a full representative democracy. And unfortunately, there's so many groups around who advocate what I'm advocating, but at the same point have fallen into the trap of not being ethically good. And it saddens me. And my court case, for example, which was supposed to be an expedited court case, started last January, and now we're into 12, 13, 14, 15 months, and we still haven't got a date now for the appeal that we have underway. So, and when I think about my lawyer in the federal court in the first go round before we had to appeal, when he spoke to the government lawyers and said to them, "When will you be calling in this case, Mr. Peckford?" And they said, "Oh no, we won't be calling him." So here they never even wanted to put me on the stand to debate and to cross-examine me about the charter. Then came the Rouleau Commission, which I opposed. But once again, the JCCF lawyers said, "We're going to put your name forward as a witness to see, you should be a part of this, even though we know you oppose it. And you can say that when you appear, because it was all conflict of interest again. It was all ethically unsound, right? Because here was the government examining itself, as is what's happening in Alberta today. And I supported Danielle Smith when she ran for the leadership. But here is an inquiry in Alberta which didn't go through the legislature. The government is appointing an inquiry to examine itself. And sadly, therefore, I've had to part ways with people that I was involved with in both Take Back Our Freedoms organization and in the National Citizens Inquiry, which I had been one of the first to push for last spring when I was on the steps of the legislature building in Victoria, a national inquiry. A lot of the people who are now part of that national inquiry wanted a federal inquiry. They didn't want to look at the whole nation and all the provinces. They just wanted a federal inquiry, and I helped persuade them with others that it has to be a national inquiry and involve the mandates and lockdowns of all the provinces and all the jurisdictions, not just the federal government. But to get back to my point about appearing, this will give you an idea. So my lawyers said about the Rouleau Commission that you were in Ottawa, you were at the Truckers' Convoy, you supported it, you spoke on Parliament Hill with all of the other speakers. You met with Tamara Leach. You met with her board. You had a press conference which was aborted, telling the people at that press conference that within a few hours the government of Canada was likely to announce bringing in the Emergencies Act, and that you're the only First Minister left who helped create the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the first place. So there shouldn't be any problem with the Commission agreeing that you should be a witness. And so my name went forward. And guess what? They turned down me being a witness at the Rouleau Commission. So at the federal court and at the Rouleau Commission, I was denied an opportunity to speak. And here I'm the only Americans, when I'm interviewed by Americans and I tell this story, they're just flabbergasted. And they've called me after the interview and said, when you started to explain this story to the audience, suddenly the audience doubled or tripled in the number of people that were starting to look in on what I was saying, because they couldn't believe what I was saying, that in this country called Canada, the only person still alive at the First Minister level would not be interviewed by the court and would not be interviewed by the Rouleau Commission. They just couldn't believe it. And so, sadly, this is what and all of the mainstream press, of course, have ignored me and will not carry any of my articles because they're all part of the game and the narrative as well. So here I am, Exhibit A, talking not only about the governments, but even some of the people within the freedom movement with whom I was involved. And you had to stand up for truth, and you had to stand up for honesty. And I said in a piece on my blog the other day, it seems to me now that it's all right to be just a little bit honest. Don't be too honest, and don't be fully honest, because that just won't pass muster in today's world. So,
Wow.
and I remember years ago when I was campaigning, when I was in government and when I was campaigning, and when an election would come around, people would say to me, "I never voted for you in the last election, Mr. Peckford, but you only have one problem: you're too honest." And I always used to respond by saying, "Well, that's a great compliment. I really appreciate that compliment that you just provided to me." And that's what it seems like now. Everybody he says, "Okay, um, that's fine, Brian, but perhaps you've gone too far." And I can respond by saying, "Too far by being honest?" So it's really a strange world we're living in.
It really is. One of our dear friends here at this show is Randy Hillier. We absolutely loved him. We loved his stand. He stood up for us at the Truckers Convoy, as did yourself. And we appreciate you to no end. You are national heroes. But here's a short clip of a much longer video wherein former MPP Randy Hillier literally unmasks our political system right now. Let me play the beginning of it for you.
And one of the reasons why I use the term mafia is the reliance and the adherence to the code of silence in political parties. In the mafia, they use the term omerta for this code of silence. Let me just read what the definition of omerta is. The obligation never, under any circumstances, to apply for justice to outsiders and never to assist in any way in the detection of crimes committed against oneself or others. That's the definition, and that's what our political parties and all their members rely on in Canada. As we've seen, especially prevalent in the last 3 years, is that all our elected representatives are silent and completely muzzled. The fear of being ostracized by their parties keeps them in line and upholding omerta. We have also seen this in our institutions, our law enforcement, our education system, our healthcare. No one will dare speak out about what is happening in our society. We also see this in our courts. Our courts have rejected their impartiality. They no longer are objective nor unbiased. They have embraced the concept of judicial notice and no longer inquire into the facts. All these elements of silence are hallmarks of an authoritarian state when people are too fearful to speak truthfully.
Mr. Peckford, I just think that the Honourable Randy Hillier is really talking about something that has really overtaken our country, the silence. I've just traveled with some doctors this last weekend, and they're telling the truth, and it is a crime against humanity what is being kept from the public people, and our politicians are playing a key role in that. It seems like we've lost our country.
Yes, I really do. There's absolutely no question. What Randy just said is dead on. There is, and I used to say even years ago, there is this wink and a nod in Canada. Whereabouts in the United States, very often the Congress had hearings and you got some information out, not all of it, but you got more information out than you got in Canada. In Canada, it was all the wink and the nod. We didn't even have the congressional hearings in our parliament like they had in the United States. And of course, when we did now in the last few years, when our former Attorney General for Canada, Jody Raybo, Wilson Raybo, and she went to a parliamentary committee, they closed it down. The Liberals and the NDP, with a majority, closed it down, even though she wasn't finished testifying about the information that she had at hand. So this is what's happened. It's all a code of silence, and you don't move outside the party discipline, regardless of how dishonest it may be. It's a very, very sad situation that we're in, and it's not getting any better. And I try to tell people that's why on the steps of the legislature building last year in Victoria, I announced my Magna Carta. And that Magna Carta is all built around honesty. Okay, and the first precepts of it were that the mainstream political parties that are now in the House of Commons have to put on their their websites their audited financial statements so that we know where their money is coming from and where the money is going. They're always criticizing the governments. Well, where can we find it on their website, right? We want to find out. And more particularly today, I've even written them about this, the Prime Minister, Mr. Polyev, and the NDP leader, asking them to bring in a bill tomorrow morning, and they can do it tomorrow morning, whereby no MP in the federal parliament can sit if they've broken the law. Because the Prime Minister has broken the law 5 times. And the leader of the Conservative Party hired Mr. Scheer as his government leader in the new Conservative Party, who had been disgraced because he took money from people who were paying money to the Conservative Party to send his children to a private school. And therefore, and that's what led to his downfall. And yet he's now resurrected without any confessions or whatever, as the top person for the for the leader of the opposition in our federal parliament, right? And the leader of the NDP is a supporter of the Liberal Party and of the Prime Minister who broke the law 5 times. None of them will even get back to me and answer that. And every time I raise it at a public meeting, I get a standing ovation, but that's the end of it. Hardly anybody asks a question about it. Nobody follows up on it. And so tomorrow morning, we could make a giant step for honesty and ethics in this country if the Parliament of Canada, the House of Commons, amended the conflict of interest bill that's there, and all they have to do is put an amendment in saying any member of the House of Commons who has been found guilty by the Ethics or Conflict of Interest Commissioner or a court of law cannot sit in this House. That's all they have to do to amend the conflict of interest. But they won't do it. And because they won't do it, we know what Mr. Hillier just said to be true.
Absolutely. I'm so disappointed in the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. People had a lot of hopes that maybe Mr. Polyev would be a different stripe, but we've already seen some very telling things. One of those things is that he went against Christine Anderson with a bunch of lies. He used liberal talking points to slam Christine Anderson, a visiting member of another country, a politician, and there was no good basis for that. I'm also pretty shocked that he's used John Baird in his campaigning, and John Baird has a very bad track record with the things he's been involved in. And Randy Hillier, in that video I just showed, goes into the list of it. And I hope that we're going to put it in our resources if we can, JT. We don't have that resource list on their flipboard's changed. But you need to listen to Randy Hillier about the whole John Baird history with the Conservative Party of Canada, and they're literally kicking out whoever they don't want to run for their party. So this Mr. Garrett that was in Oxford riding was a perfect candidate, and they just get rid of him because he's pro-life or has traditional values or whatever, and they're killing their party.
One of the things I did when I became leader of the Conservative PC Party of Newfoundland was that the district association, the riding association, would determine who the candidate was for that riding. There would be no interference from the leader. And I had people coming to me at the time. I had a deputy mayor of one of the largest municipalities in Newfoundland asking me to support him if he put his name up in the Conservative riding to run. And I said, no, I can't do that. You have to get elected on your own without any interference from the leader or anybody in the executive of the party. And later on, when I was gone and other leaders came in, they changed that and they had the final say. And it's true now in the federal parties. These federal leaders inject themselves into riding association elections that are supposed to be democratic and honest, and the candidates running for, right, or the people running to be the candidate for that party are supposed to be on their own, do their own democratic campaigning, and muster enough support. Because I used to say to a lot of these people, if you can't campaign and win the nomination legitimately, sure, I don't want you part of the party. I don't want you part of the party. So, you got to do it on your own. And you got to, advocate your views and persuade the majority of people in that riding to be that you are the best of the group that are running for the nomination. And so, yeah, it's
Mr. Peckford,
unbelievable.
it is unbelievable. And we can't get any politicians that are in Parliament to actually define what a woman is. I think it's very concerning when the transgender issue is now becoming front and center. Women are losing their places. I thought we were supposed to be, feminists, and I was never a feminist,
Exactly.
but what's happening to women's spaces? And we, Pierre Poilievre won't say a word in defense of the loss of women's private spaces and the standing of women in our nation.
Exactly. And he called me, by the way, and asked for my support, and I said no. He called me just straight out. I said no.
Thank you.
Your blue suit, blue suit liberal. And
Yep.
I said no. Your party. I said I'd written your party many times when I was a member of your party, and I never ever got an answer. And I still have copies of the letters here. Put them in the mail, and I kept a copy of these letters, and they never ever got back to me. And so I left the party because it was obvious to me, and it should have been obvious to me before. I should have left earlier, but nevertheless I did leave and took a stand that the party needs massive reform, including disclosing, having on the website front and center the audited financial statements of their party, so everybody who participates in that party knows what's going on. It's like the National Citizens Inquiry today, which is not a political party. There's nothing about their financing on their site. There's nothing about who's behind this. Who are the people on the support committee that I was on before I resigned? Who are the people? And where do those people come from? Are they part of certain organizations in Canada? How come they don't want to they talk about attacking the government for accountability and transparency, yet there's nothing on their site about who's behind this except the two names that they had to do legally for the nonprofit corporation. But the nonprofit corporation is supported by a support group, and nobody knows who the names of these support groups are, nor their finances. So in Canada, we've got to get back to basic values of morality and being honest, and that's the foundation. Before we start talking about putting this fellow in or girl or in a position in a party, first of all, we've got to ask them, where's your finances? What do you stand for? For example, right now, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada says he wants to defund CBC, yet his party's platform says the CBC is going to stay. So here you have the hypocrisy going on.
So he's just trying to get a few claps, a few audience
Exactly.
approval, but he's not serious, and you can't trust him.
You can't trust them. And I said this on my blog last week. I said the same thing. Why won't the leader of the Conservative Party stop writing Twitter, put a bill before the House of Commons saying defund CBC and allow the vote to go ahead, then we'll know for sure where the Conservatives stand, and we'll know where the Liberals stand, and we'll know where the NDP stands. He doesn't have to write a letter. That's grandstanding. That's cheap political campaigning, which most Canadians now are cynical about.
We really are cynical about that. And I think that, there's a little bit of sort of charisma that comes along with Pierre Poilievre and the way that he can debate or whatever, but it's short-lived. He's exposed himself, even with the war in the Ukraine. And I don't even know what side you fall on, but I don't want war. I don't want, we have to stop being warmongers. And we should just try to help the people at home. Along Highway 1 here, sir, there's 2 tent setups now. I've never seen that in all my years. They're camping because they're homeless on the side of Highway 1. It's not even downtown, It's just right in our faces.
How about lighting a fire on your patio?
Right.
We've had that happen in the little development that I live in.
Wow.
I can walk 3 minutes from here, and I'm complaining to the city council every day about it.
Yes.
And I said, you're enabling these people. You're not helping them get off their problem, to get solutions to their problem. You're enabling them because you're giving them drugs and you're giving them everything that they want. And so this is not the approach that should be taken. And to get even more moral about it, more spiritual about it, every time I talk about the supremacy of God in the Charter, which introduces the Charter, the supremacy of God, right? Whereas this nation is founded on the principles of the supremacy of God and the rule of law, we are going, and it continues on, to give the various sections of the Charter. And now the courts, back in 85, a judge in Alberta and the Supreme Court of Canada sort of accepts this, said, well, the people who created the Charter didn't mean a Christian God. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We were all Christians at that table. What other God did we know? We never knew any other God.
Right.
That's in this court decision of 1985, where the Supreme Court of Canada quotes a judge out of Alberta, and they used his quote and his judgment on what I meant by God when I supported God, supremacy of God in the Charter of Rights, and they're wrong. And yet it's standing there as the principle now, and so that therefore in all the court actions that are happening, they're ignoring the framework in which the Charter is supposed to be considered. It's supposed to be considered under the umbrella of supremacy of God and the rule of law. And God meaning the Judeo-Christian God that we, at the time, that's the only God we knew, that's the only God I know today. And therefore, it was obvious that what follows after the supremacy of God is the natural law of the universe for us, right? And therefore, that must take precedence over man-made law.
Well, you wonder whose God they're all talking about, because Pierre Poilievre was raised in a small town. I know Maxime Bernier. I just appreciate maybe why he had to leave the Conservative Party of Canada. There's things he can't even bring up that were reasons he had to go, but he saw that this is corrupt to the core, and he had to do what he had to do. And I wish that Canadians would wake up and see that he's actually right in front of us as a potential leader. And that needs this could change the whole nation if people would wake up to the answer that's in front of us.
Absolutely, no question. I keep saying when I'm speaking about what leader actually stood up on a field in Manitoba and was arrested for defending the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have a leader right there before us who is willing to put in writing all of these things where the other parties are not. And so this is very sad that an alternative exists, which we will not even want. So people are become so fearful and so woke in their whole approach that they think they should be embarrassed if they use the word God, when they should be very proud to use the word God, when they should be very proud to use the word ethics and honesty, right? But it's gone by the wayside, and
Yes, sir.
I'm just too honest now. That's the word I get back. I'm
Please
just
don't
too honest.
stop. Please
Yeah,
don't
you've
stop.
gone too far.
Yeah. One of the most dishonest and corrupt leaders we've ever had. I have a clip for you I'd like to play regarding what Justin Trudeau had to say about mandating vaccines. Take a look.
And all of the scientists and the medical experts and the researchers, not just in Canada, but around the world, understood that vaccination was going to be the way through this. And therefore, while not forcing anyone to get vaccinated, I chose to make sure that all the incentives and all the protections were there to encourage Canadians to get vaccinated. And that's exactly what they did. We got vaccinated to a higher level than just about any other of our peer countries. And that's why we had a less deadly pandemic than most other countries. Now, I see a lot of people nodding along with that. But boy, oh boy, you know, the comments section on the live stream right now is exploding with people who are in deep, deep disagreement with everything I just said. And we have to figure out how to continue to protect those people, because my job as Prime Minister is to keep people alive and keep people safe and keep democracy going, whether or not they choose to believe that's what I'm doing or not.
So
And
that
this
was
Prime
just this last
Minister,
week. Yeah.
wow. And this Prime Minister's bureaucrats in the Department of Transportation, when they were queried by my lawyer, indicated that they had no medical information to back up banning Canadians from going aboard planes and traveling to visit their friends or their businesses in other parts of our own country. They could not defend medically and scientifically the mandate, the travel mandate that this Prime Minister's cabinet and government brought in. He is lying through his teeth, and anybody who knows anything, long before this pandemic came in, right, they knew that masks didn't work. There were all kinds of studies indicating that. They knew that these kinds of measures don't work. And then we had a professor out of the university, Simon Fraser University, right here in British Columbia, telling us that he just looked at 80 studies and he concluded that the cure was worse than the disease. And that was made public. That was made public. That was a public document back in 21, where he talked about that they all knew back in 2020. And I looked last night at Dr. Bardi, the Thai researcher in Europe, who gave a speech in Athens last fall, September 22, where he talked about, and he had put this information out, back in 2020, about the research and the damage that the vaccine does and how these lockdowns don't work. So to think that he could say those kinds of things last week when he coerced and he stopped me from traveling. He stopped thousands of people from traveling in our own country.
Sure.
And for the nerve of him to say that and still be Prime Minister of our nation is and not only that, if you look at the polls, he's still polling relatively well given what he's done and what he's said.
It's absolutely shocking. And I don't know if your ears were burning, sir, but you were mentioned a couple of times on our latest, on our tour. And Dr. Byron Bridle mentioned you specifically as he tore a strip off of Dr. Bonnie Henry in our province, and calling this the most tyrannical province, and her mandates and her forcing of the medical establishment to get these vaccines, and putting misinformation even in her press releases. And he went at her, and that video right now on my Rumble channel's at about 28 or 30,000 views so far. It's only been up 2 days, and that's pretty good for my channel. One aspect of it, and it's because we're living in this province where everything's a mess. You just can't believe anybody. Not Dr. Bonnie Henry, not anyone.
How do you like? I contacted Dr. Brian Bridle way back when he first got into trouble, and he was good enough to write me back at the time and told him I fully support, as I did Charles Hoff here in British Columbia.
Wonderful.
At the time, told him I fully supported what he was doing. As a matter of fact, a number of people in Ontario at the universities in Ontario contacted me who were losing their jobs as a result of what was happening. And so I'm familiar with all parts of Canada. But how about this? There's a community, BC, Powell River on the Sunshine Coast. I went up there last summer and spoke. There was a small freedom group there. Fantastic group of people. And they filled the theater, and I spoke. Robin Murray is the head of the group. Anyway, they've continued on with their freedom fighting and their support of the Charter of Rights to the point where they persuaded the council in Powell River to have a proclamation of Charter Day on April 17th, the day when 41 years ago, when the Charter became law. And they've got the mayor and the council on side to do so. And they've done so in the last week or so. They have, the mayor declared Charter Day, right? Which was fantastic and a great success by this small freedom group. I sent that to my local city council here on Vancouver Island, to all the members of the council and to the mayor. I haven't heard a word. The former mayor and council last year, when I said, look, I'm giving talks to MLAs all across the country on the Charter and the Constitution Act of 1982. And I just want to put out there that, you might have heard about it, you may not, but just in case you did, I want you to know I'm available to speak to you at any time, any hour of any day. I will break away to make sure I brief the council of the municipality that I'm a resident of and in which I pay taxes. They rejected me to appear before the council, even an informal meeting of council, to give my views on the thing. And now the new council and a new mayor is in place, and I just sent them all the information on what happened in Powell River and how me going over across the Georgia Strait to Powell River embraced the opportunity, the democratic opportunity for me to speak, whether they agree with me or not, but gave me the opportunity to speak. It's like Voltaire said, I might disagree with what you got to say, but I'll fight to the death your right to say it. And that's what they did in Powell River. And to their everlasting credit, the elected, democratically elected council and mayor there have followed through with the Freedom Group to declare Charter Day or Freedom Day under the Charter. But my own council here, I had an arrangement made last year to speak to the high school here. A teacher had heard me speak and thought it was a great idea to have me come to the social studies class. And she went to the teacher and the administration, and they agreed. 4 days before my appearance at the assembly to speak and give a speech on the Charter, no politics, just on the Charter, about the Charter, and what your rights and freedoms were under the Charter and how it came about. She was called in to the principal's office and told that this was all off, that this could not go ahead, and she asked why, and the principal just said, well, Mr. Peckford is a controversial figure. And she said, well, all the more reason for him to be here, isn't it? To give the kids students a chance to see various issues or various sides of an issue. Anyway, it was totally cancelled, and therefore I couldn't appear. Most of the venues in which I have spoken on Vancouver Island have been churches, Christian churches, fundamentalist Christian churches. I spoke to one last week in Nanaimo with John Carpay from the Justice Centre. It was a church, a gospel hall that the venue we got. The venue I had in Alberni was a church. The venue I had in Black Creek was a church. The venue I had in Nanaimo and another occasion was a church in Cobble Hill and in Victoria. All Christian churches.
That's good news.
They believe. So
yeah, because they haven't all stood. So it's wonderful that there are those churches that are doing the right thing and being a platform.
And here in Parksville, where I live, there were some small business people who defied their Chamber of Commerce and who provided an opportunity for me to speak in their venue. They could take under the fire regulations 50, and I did in one venue. I did it twice, and I did it in another venue.
I'm so very happy to hear that.
Yeah, but they have been maligned, and
yes,
they but they stood up and still are to this day. So there are some freedom loving people on Vancouver Island in my area who like the Christian churches. Now the mainstream Christian churches have not been in favor at all. These are fundamentalist Christian churches. None of the mainstream, none of the United Church of Canada, the Anglican Church of Canada, the Roman Catholic Church of Canada, none of them, or the Presbyterian Church or the Lutheran Church or whatever other churches that are in this area, which are more mainstream and historical in their existence, have not. And in some communities, the people who wanted me to speak couldn't find a venue.
Yeah, we've had that problem as well. And I absolutely agree. And it's sad when churches had the unvaccinated section and the vaccinated section, and they stood up and told children to get vaccinated. And of course, now we're seeing the sad results of that. I have one more clip from, I want to get your opinion before I let you go. Thank you so much for your generosity with your time today. But one more clip from our Prime Minister on misinformation and disinformation. And it's actually a little bit funny because he gets it quite wrong. But I want to get your take on this. One moment.
It's been a word you've used many times. So how do you decide what's misinformation and when to use this word, since the word can encompass different ideas amongst Canadians? Thank you.
Unlike all of you in this room, or most of you in this room, I never studied political science. I studied English literature. So words really matter to me. And you may call me old-fashioned, but I tend to defer to the actual definitions of words when I use them. And misinformation and disinformation, which you used a little interchangeably, are actually very different things. Disinformation is when things that are false, things that are untrue, are spread by people who don't know any better. Misinformation is a deliberate choice to spread and share falsehoods for a particular purpose, whether it's a personal purpose or a political purpose or a creating chaos purpose. Now,
some people in your audience may not know that I, through the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and stuff, and through the constitutional negotiations, and earlier negotiated with his father. And in my book that I published in 2012, I tell the story about how he and Mr. Chrétien both lied to the people of Newfoundland as what they were prepared to do as related to our offshore resources. And lied publicly at public meetings and so on, and on television and all the rest of it. They lied to them, which we proved, which we were able to prove. Now, this is so sad to see the Trudeau legacy, because that, in history will record at some point just how these Mr. Trudeau Sr. and Mr. Trudeau Jr., how they manipulated the truth for their own political purposes. It is amazing to me to watch these things happen again from my earlier days in politics, and where I was lied to by Prime Minister Trudeau Sr., and now seeing it happen again with his son as Prime Minister of Canada. And it seems like we just will not learn some of those basic lessons of knowing when the truth is available and when it's not.
Well, you are a wealth of information. I leave every interview with you absolutely blessed that you are Canadian, that you're the real deal, that we can trust you, and you've been a blessing to this country. And while we continue to fight, millions of people appreciate you, love you, will give you a standing ovation in any room that you're in. And don't let them get to you. Don't let them stop you. We're not going to let them stop us here. We're just sick and tired of the lies. And we continue to propagate the truth no matter what the cost. Yourself, Randy Hillier, men like Maxime Bernier, telling the truth, standing up. Eventually, hopefully, we will get an awakening happening, and we pray for that day. I thank you for your time today, Mr. Peckford. I hope to do it again really soon.
Thank you very much for having me, and we will prevail because the truth will prevail.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. It shall prevail. Thank you. All right. Oh, I am always blessed when Mr. Peckford will give us any kind of time. I actually, it's such an honor. The last living architect of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and him being alive to see how it's been dismantled and ignored. Him being alive to be able to fight back in the face of what Canadian tyranny has done. I love it. One more quick video before we get going, and I want to let you know that coming up next week, we have an interview with John O'Looney. You know that he has been pivotal in one of the very first undertakers, is that what we would call them? But to come out, with talking about all of those things being found in people. Strangest thing, everyone, considering the platform we're on right now. Strangest thing, all kinds of strange, spongy things that are in people's veins after they die. What could that be? We had somebody talk about it at the NCI here in Canada, and other people across the world finding the same thing. So we're going to be doing an incredible interview with him coming up, and you will see that next week. Glenn Beck gives his goodbyes to Tucker Carlson and includes an invitation to join the Blaze. That would be phenomenal. Take a look.
Where are you going to get the truth? Tucker was the only guy out there that I felt was in the mainstream media that was telling America the truth. Who's doing that? There's nobody in the mainstream media. Nobody. And I now include Fox. Getting rid of Tucker Carlson? Wow. Letting him walk out the door even? Wow. The guy's at the top of it. He had, 3 days with Elon Musk last week. You get to sit down with Elon Musk at this time with everything that's going on between the Starship and Twitter. And you're gone the next week? Never seen anything like it.
Absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. If any of you love what we do, we are being siphoned off of the main stage every single day. Canada wants to shut us down, Bill C-11. Do you like the content that you get here? If you do, would you go to my website, Laura-Lynn.tv, make a donation, join us, help us in any way that you can. We appreciate if you are a truth-seeking individual just as we are. And many of you writing us, thank you. Some of you send me like a little donation and you say it's for the Cremo, because you know I'm complaining inflation is so bad, the Cremo's going up everywhere. What are we going to do? It is a really strange time in our land, and we're hearing that the dollar is in a lot of trouble. The dollar, Canadian dollar, is faring very badly against the American dollar. And the American dollar at any day can, you know, they can call in their loans or whatever. We're hearing that some bad things are going on there. So if you would like to invest your funds into silver or gold, we do recommend Steve Merrill at sovereignize at protonmail.com. And give them a call if you'd like to do something. That's what we're doing, because we're trying to take care in advance of things going wrong. We are happy to see Don Lemon gone from CNN. I'm kind of sad because I thought he was the reason that they didn't get good ratings, because he sucks. And it was so hard to watch him. It was so pathetic. But, you know, we'd show his greatest clips here. And he didn't even get told personally by any of them, but rather by his agent. Pretty funny. All right. Well, I love being here with you. Thank you for being here with me. I'm going to leave you today with a passage. And JT, I do have it up on screen so that people can actually read it today. I've told you that when I can't sleep, I'll put BibleGateway.com on in my ear, and I end up having the best sleeps ever. And so last night, I'm reading. First, I was listening to 1 Peter 2, and what comes on is this amazing passage about being free. And I want to say to you that I felt a little bit of a rebuke in my heart, because I often can be pretty upset and angry at the crazy people out there, like our leaders. But this talks about being a free people, but it also admonishes us in what to do and how to behave. And I don't know if I'm the best at this, and I don't know what the balance is between pushing back, fighting hard, and, as it says, being a slave to God. This challenged me. Let me know what your thoughts are. Send me an email at Laura-Lynn live at protonmail.com. Let me know how do we navigate the balance of standing up but honoring the Word of God. In 1 Peter 2:16-25, it says, live as free people. Do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Wow. Do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. Do you have some harsh masters? Yeah. Right here in my province. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. I don't know, I kind of think that Billboard Chris was that kind of guy. Billboard Chris did not retaliate when he had things hurled at him. And so it says, instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. God entrusted the justice of it all. Well, Jesus entrusted the justice to God. Is that what we have to do? What's the balance between the justice of God in a situation? Because we all know that with one flick of God's baby finger, Justin Trudeau is gone. With one flick of God's baby finger, the Pope is gone. With one flick of God's baby finger, Biden is gone. So we know God's in control. So what is the balance between believing that and trusting in the justice of God and fighting back? That is something that I wrestle with, because I'm a fighter and I'm a big mouth. And believe me, They know it out there. And so I really do wonder about that. But it does say he himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. And I do believe healing comes from God. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. That's what we're to do. Return to the shepherd. Maybe he'll help to guide us through this maze. God bless you. See you tomorrow. Take care. You know, it's not easy to deliver the truth of what our sick world is doing, but for some of us, we feel that we have no choice. Because if we are silent about these abominable things, then we are letting evil go unchecked, and we cannot do that. For those of you wonderful people who are writing me and are sharing your encouragement, I am deeply grateful. Thank you for all the letters that you've been sending. Thank you for the donations and the support. I found out that in order to speak the truth, you have to become very, very strong. If you would go to my website at www.laura-lynn.tv, you'll find all of the ways that you can contact me. Remember, my friends, all is well. All is well. Thanks for joining me.